discussing the issues that make Phoenix a world-class city. Now, on the issues.
Hi, I'm Phoenix City Councilman Sal DiCiccio. I've got a real exciting guest today on our program. And not only that, but I've got a real important initiative that you're going to be voting on in November that very few people know about that's going to have a big impact on you and your life. I've got Christina Corieri from the Goldwater Institute who helped shepherd some of the most significant legislation that's coming through that the media didn't even talk about. Tell us a little bit. It's called Right to Try. Tell us a little bit about what it does, and then we can go into the fundamentals after that, Christina.
Absolutely. So Right to Try is a referral that's going to appear on your November ballot, and what it says is that terminal patients who have exhausted all of their FDA-approved options for treatment, they have nothing left to try, can try an experimental medication as a last resort in an attempt to save their own life. There's protections built in. These individuals have to sign informed consent saying that they know that there could be some unknown side effects at this point, but this only applies to medications that have passed that first level of safety test. So we know they're not inherently dangerous, and if somebody wants to try to save their own life, they should have that right to do so.
So let me make sure I drive this home because it's real important, and I'll walk us through why I think it's important, not just for Phoenix, but for the Valley and the state of Arizona. Terminal patients that have tried every other kind of method, and they still are in that situation where there's nothing left for them to go. Normally in the past, they would go down to Mexico, they would go to Great Britain, or they would go to Europe for this type of treatment, are now going to be able to get that treatment here in Arizona. They're going to be able to choose their own health care at that point. Is that correct?
Yes, at that point, they're going to be able to ask the manufacturer, will you let me try this? They'll be able to, the manufacturer can charge them up to the cost of the amount of the medication so they're not losing money, but they will have access to it here. And that's important because even if somebody is eligible for a clinical trial, that clinical trial might be in New York, it might be in Florida, and somebody might not have the funds to fly every 2 weeks to there. They might not be able to make it to England where the medication may already be approved. They'll be able to take it here and at home.
Matter of fact, we have a case study from a very good friend of ours that went to Great Britain, to England, in order to get treatment because they couldn't get that treatment here. Now everything is okay.
Absolutely, and they'll be involved with the campaign. We had stories of people who came and told the legislature. We had a woman named Lorraine. She was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. The traditional and approved medications were not helping her, but there was a clinical trial in Virginia. She lived in Boston, and she was able to get into that trial. Now, luckily for Lorraine, her family was able to afford frequent travel to Virginia to get her the care she needed, and she responded, and she's alive today. She got to see all of her grandchildren because of that. But 2 of the women that she became friends with that were receiving the traditional treatments with her, they were also accepted into the clinical trial, but because they didn't have the funds to go down to Virginia to get it, they were unable to join, and sadly both of them passed away.
Well, that's a terrible side of what's going on with our medical care in America right now. A lot of these drugs, a lot of these experimentations are being held up by the federal government where they could actually be out there saving lives. They're held up, and while people are out there suffering. And I think what's important to note with this legislation is that it gives those people that opportunity to make decisions for themselves.
Absolutely, and I'll give you a great story about that, about when people know better than government. So there's a woman named Jen McNary. She has 2 sons that both have the same terminal disease. It's called Duchenne's. It only strikes boys, and it usually kills them in their late teens or early 20s. There's no medication approved right now to treat Duchenne's, but there is a medication in clinical trials. One of her sons was able to get into the trial, the other son was not. So for 18 months, she's watched one son go from steps away from a wheelchair to running, walking, and playing, while her other son not only is in the wheelchair, but is now losing the ability to use his arms. Every boy in this trial has improved, and 2 only stabilized, but when you're talking about Duchenne's, that's a huge step because these boys never stabilize, they always get worse. 2 stabilized, the rest saw dramatic improvement, but this medication is still not approved and her older son can't get it. This is a mother who knows that it works, she's seen it on her son, she wants it for her other son, and because of the way the law is now, she can't get that.
Well, Christina, it's glorious and tragic at the same time. I mean, if you think about it, how could you as a parent watch this happening to your own child, knowing that health care is literally one step away within the same room, and you could not provide that health care to your family? And that's a choice that you should be able to make as a mom and dad and as a patient.
It absolutely is. Medical decisions belong to doctors and patients, not to bureaucrats.
And I think that's the whole premise behind this bill, getting it through Arizona, was we started seeing the federal government just hold back on this medication. There just doesn't seem to be any will on their part to get it done quickly, especially when you're talking about people at the end of their lives having the right to make that decision, to be able to see that. I tell you, from my end, I think it's very tragic for the people that are in the lower incomes, the poor, the seniors, that can't travel. They can't get on a plane and travel to Europe for treatment every month or live there every month. So only people that can afford it can do that. But I'll tell you, there's another side of this bill that I think that the public needs to be aware of, and I've already got the city of Phoenix geared on it, is that not only will this help those individuals that are going through a very difficult time in their lives and being able to make their own health care choices, but now I want you to think of what this is going to do to the state of Arizona's economy at the same time. Instead of people going from New Mexico or California to Great Britain, now they'll be able to come to Arizona for treatment. And what else does that bring in here? It brings in those technical labs. It brings in those labs that are now able to provide that type of care. So now we're going to start seeing an influx of an incredible amount of healthcare coming into the state. I turned to the city officials, and nobody knew about this bill. Matter of fact, I guarantee you the people that are watching this are thinking, what? Is that really something I'm going to be voting on? What's happening? Because it was just so under the radar. The media never picked up. They picked up all the controversy, but they never picked up the beauty of what was coming out of the legislature. And so I informed staff. I said, look, we've got a bill coming through. We might want to re-gear our economic development efforts to start approaching and put a plan in place of approaching those businesses that operate with these types of medication to come to the state of Arizona before everybody else does. I mean, this has taken fire in other states, hasn't it? Give us a couple states that this has passed unanimously on.
Yeah, it's moving really fast. Just this week, it passed out of the Colorado legislature with unanimous votes in the House and Senate. It's going to Governor Hickenlooper's desk right now. It's passed the House in Missouri.
Unanimously, right?
Unanimously.
Everywhere, right?
Everywhere.
Except
Arizona. There was a split vote here. It was also unanimous in Louisiana.
Yeah. So we had, from my district, we had Eric Meyer, who's a legislator, vote against this. What was his reasoning to vote against treating the terminally ill? And where this has not happened anywhere else in other states, we actually had people like Eric Meyer fighting this thing. What was his reasoning behind it? Can you give us some thoughts?
Yes, so the most common thing that we heard in the legislature here was that this gives people false hope, that these medications are going to help them. And we've said from the beginning, these medications won't help everybody, but they will help some people. Shouldn't you have the right to go ahead and try that? And I actually think the recent story of Josh Hardy puts that whole false hope argument completely to the ground. Josh Hardy was a 7-year-old boy who'd already beat cancer twice. He got an infection in his liver and kidneys. He was literally on death's doorstep. His doctor said the only medication that could help you is an investigational drug made by a company called Chimerix. They worked with the FDA to do something that is basically never done. It was really only done because of the media firestorm. They started a special trial for Josh and 19 others. Josh got this medication just in time, and within a matter of days, he was released from the hospital. That was an investigational medication. Will all of them work that well? No. But will some of them? They absolutely will.
And so it always interests me what, Arizona's been an anomaly on some things, why people fight things like this. It just doesn't make sense. It's just like giving people false hope. Well, that's their right to have that kind of hope. And why wouldn't you want them to have hope?
Absolutely. And doctors actually support this. There's been polling done by the American Enterprise Institute of all sorts of specialties, neurologists, cardiologists, ER doctors. By overwhelming percentages, they support allowing patients access to experimental medications as long as there's informed consent.
Walk us through some of the safeguards that we have in this legislation.
So there's several. The first safeguard is obviously that you have to provide informed consent. You understand that this medication is investigational. There could be some unknown side effects. The second is that the medications available have to have already passed phase 1. Phase 1 is really your basic safety test. They've already done animal tests, your first tests on humans. We're making sure that these drugs aren't lethal or have serious side effects that are immediately noticeable. And the third is that these medications have to remain in an ongoing clinical trial. So if down the road in phase 2 or phase 3, the FDA has a safety concern that pops up where it discontinues the trial, they would no longer be available under this as well. So we have some major safety protections built in.
Sounds like you have a lot of protections in this bill that passed the legislature. So tell us when this is it's going to happen in November. Is it the election in November?
It is. It will be in the election in November. It will be on the ballot statewide.
Wow. And what's it called again? The right to try?
The right to try.
Yeah, this is exciting for Arizona. I've got to tell you, from people like myself who have always believed that people should have access to health care and it should be free, choice where people can have their own health care. I think this has significant movement for the state of Arizona, and I think that it's going to lead the state of Arizona in a place that it's never been before.
I completely agree with that. And this is a fundamental right. It resonates with everybody that you should be able to make your own healthcare choice. I mean, cancer doesn't care if you're a Republican, a Democrat, if you're old or
Green
young,
party or doesn't matter,
male or female, it doesn't care. Everybody has seen somebody that they know and love have that. And everybody thinks, if that was me, I would want to have the right to decide how I wanted to deal with that.
Well, the Goldwater Institute has always been on the cutting edge of bringing in people's, freedoms to be able to make their own decisions in life. It's interesting, some of the battles that you get into, it's always been based on the fact of giving people the right to choose their own destinies, the right to choose their own path in their own lives. And this is just one of those things. Tell me how you got involved in it and how you got involved in the right to try, allowing individuals, and how the Institute got found out about it. I'm kind of curious about the background, because that's something that the public never gets a chance to see.
We had a couple individuals come to us and talk to us a little bit about investigational medications, and they said, is there something that can be done about this? And so we set to work, our policy team, our communications team, our litigation team, and we said, what can we do that we think would help people and stand up against any potential challenge? And so we spent several months researching and drafting and coming up with something that we thought met all of those, and that's how Right to Try was born.
And I'm hearing too that the pharmaceutical companies are afraid of the federal government now, and the companies that are doing the health care are afraid of the federal government. They're afraid that if they do come here and start doing this, the federal government's going to clamp down on them on other states. Have you been hearing some of these concerns?
I haven't heard that. I'm sure because of the massive power that the FDA wields that there could be some that do fear that. We've actually, though, had pharmaceutical companies that have come out in support of an idea like this. So, I think you're going to have split feelings, and the FDA does have an enormous amount of power. So for some of them, that fear may be very real.
Because they don't want their drugs held up on other things either.
Right. But, I don't think that the FDA will come in and say, we're going to punish, people who have X disease simply because you gave a drug to help some kid that has cancer. I don't think that's right. That would be quite the news story, and one that we would be happy to talk about.
Yeah, well, I'm sure everybody would. That would be a story on its own. So what do you think could happen with this? My understanding is Clint Bolick with the Goldwater Institute has already done the look to see if this thing is constitutional and whether or not it could withstand a court case. Because more than likely, the federal government may want to push this, because we've seen the overreach of the federal government getting more and more involved in our personal lives. This literally says, no, you can't get involved in our personal lives. We're going to make our own decisions. We're going to make decisions with my doctor. I don't want a federal bureaucrat overlooking what my doctor's care is to me. And if you think about it, I give this speech to kids, youth in high school primarily, because I want to go walk them through what's really happening in government. Mm-hmm. And I walk them through this. I said, do you really want me involved in your personal life? Because when you say you want the government involved in it, do you really want me overseeing everything that happens inside your home and every decision you make? Well, they're like, of course not. I said, well, that's what you're asking at times. I said, so the idea then is to give you more freedoms, more liberties, and that's really what the Goldwater Institute's been pushing throughout.
Absolutely. You know, it will be interesting to see how the FDA decides to react. They have options. They could allow the states to do what they're doing, allow the states to have right to try and let that stand. That's what they've chosen to do with medical marijuana. That's even what they've chosen to do with recreational marijuana in states like Colorado. So the idea that they would say, well, that's okay, but you know, these cancer medications, those really, we're going to take those away from you. That would seem to be contradictory, but so they could go that route of just letting the states do what they want. That would certainly be the route I would hope they would take. It seems the sensible one to me, but they do have the option if they wanted to try to challenge the law in court. We believe we have a good case to be made that this is a fundamental right protected by the Constitution, and Clint Bullock is a fantastic litigator, and
As we know at the City of Phoenix.
Absolutely, and the Goldwater Institute would be there every step of the way.
Well, from my end, I am very, very proud of all the work that you do over there. I mean, it's significant. This is just some of the stuff that people don't realize and they don't see. Where were some of the states where this initiative got started? Was it Louisiana that got started first, or Missouri, or?
So Arizona was the first to get it introduced,
Right.
and Arizona was actually the first to get it passed through the legislature. But with Arizona, we decided we really wanted to send it to the ballot. We wanted a state where the people would get a say, to send a message to Washington that this is a right that the people want, that the people believe they have. So Arizona was first in all of that. We won't be first to enactment because we do have to wait for the November ballot. So right after Arizona, Colorado jumped in on the act, and Missouri jumped in, and Louisiana jumped in after that.
What other states do you see coming up next? I talked to Clint about this, and he said that we have close, maybe up to 15 different states that now are looking at enacting similar legislation.
Yeah. We're talking to legislators all across the country in red states, blue states, the purple states like Colorado. I would expect we're going to see states like Texas and Florida go next year, but you're also going to see more blue states like in Michigan. I think it's not even outside the realm of possibility that we'll get a deeply blue state like California.
Oh, really? You know, you never know, I guess, with California. You've got a lot of things going on in that state that you don't have in other places either. And like you said, I don't think it's a red or blue issue. It really is about a people's rights issue, of individuals making their own health care issue, especially the terminal patients.
Absolutely. We had such a great coalition in Colorado. We had two fantastic lead sponsors. We had Dr. Janak Joshi, a conservative Republican, and he wanted to introduce it. He went and got to go with him Representative Joanne Janal, a liberal Democrat who has her PhD in pharmacology. And these two together really worked every portion of their legislature out there. They were able to get every single vote. It's been bipartisan across the board.
Well, if you look at the polling numbers in Arizona, I think you're close to, what, 80% of the people are just strongly in favor of this initiative. It's something that we've never seen before. I mean, a completely unified Arizona.
Because people believe they have a right to control their own health care. They do not, the way it is now, if I want to try an investigational medication and I can't get into a clinical trial and my doctor says this is what's best for you to try this investigational medication, the company is willing to give it to you. The next step is that your doctor has to fill out a 100-hour form, a form that the FDA itself says will take your doctor 100 hours. Tell me how many doctors have 100 hours to fill out a form for you. Tell me how many people have the money to pay their doctor for 100 hours of filling out busy work, of paperwork. Then that form goes to a bureaucrat at the FDA who has 30 days to look at it and say, you know what, maybe I don't agree with the decision that you and your doctor made, or I have a question, I'm going to send it back to you. And every time that paperwork comes back, that 30-day clock starts over. Less than 1,000 people are able to get this kind of access right now. We've seen cases where somebody has been granted access the very day they died.
Well, I want to make sure, because you never know when people are tuning into this program, we reiterate what it is we're talking about. It's an initiative that's coming to the state of Arizona. It's called Arizona Right to Try. And what it does is it gives terminally ill patients the right to try the medication that they would normally get in other places. And they have a considerable amount of safeguards. And I want you to walk us through those safeguards, because that is something that we talked about earlier, but I want to make sure we hit that home because I want people to realize how, even with those safeguards that are in place, it went through an incredible amount of scrutiny before it got to the point where people have the ability to try the medication.
So again, this is limited to terminal patients. So this isn't a free-for-all. This isn't my knee hurts, I want to try something experimental. These are patients who the known side effect without getting something is that they will die. So they're terminal patients who have exhausted all of their FDA-approved options. So we have the safeguard built in that they have to provide written informed consent, saying that they understand the investigational nature of this medication and that there could be some unknown side effects. The second is that these medications have to have passed phase 1, which is really your basic safety test to ensure that these medications are not lethal. These medications don't have...
Walk us through what a phase 1 looks like.
Right, so how you develop a medication, you start with in the lab, they do testing and studies there, then you'd move on to animal testing. After animal testing, you would seek approval from the FDA to start testing on people in a phase 1. Phase 1s are small, and they are usually fairly quick. It's to make sure that taking the drug, metabolizing the drug, doesn't kill you, doesn't cause these immediate and drastic side effects.
And then what kind, not that you would know the type of side effects that would come with it, but is there a period of time in there before they start evaluating the potential side effects on the medication?
So they would be starting to evaluate the side effects immediately and through all 3 stages. In stage 2, they're really looking at efficacy. Does this work to treat the targeted condition? What side effects are we seeing? And then phase 3, they continue that and they're also perfecting the dosages. So this would actually make medications available at any point after a successful completion of phase 1. And if at any time serious safety concerns come up by the FDA where they've said, you know what, this is not safe anymore, we're going to pause the trial, we're going to close the trial, then access would end under this as well. And so what I think is important about this is that these drugs, while they may have unknown side effects, there is no more danger to somebody outside the trial than the people that are already trying it inside the trial.
And you have significant success stories already proving what happens. We talked about that one friend of mine, which we won't mention at the program yet because I believe that they're going to get involved in the campaign. But they had to travel. I just remember how hard it was on their family. They couldn't get the medication here in our own country. In America, they could not get the medication. They had to fly over to London, use up all their family monies to save the child, which of course a parent would do. But they had to live there for almost a year, I think it was, in order to get the type of medication for their child who now came back and is doing well. But they could not get that medication here in America. It was very disturbing. And could you imagine what it's like? Let's say you're, like I came from a very poor family. My mom and dad, my dad had a 6th grade education, my mom had a 4th grade education, laborer family. My parents would not have had the money, even though they would have done everything that they could, but they would never have had the family money to be able to take us anywhere else outside of the state, let alone down the street, So can you imagine what that does in providing health care to people that are underprivileged, don't have the income levels to be able to support traveling across the world to get medication and medical support?
Yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine the position that would put a parent in, or a child when it was their parent. So no, this is so important because it will level the playing field in many ways. It will make things available here in Arizona. I mean, when you're sick, when your child's sick, the last thing you need is stacks of government paperwork. The last thing you need is to be traveling untold number of miles frequently to put everything that you have on the line for that. You should be able to access it here where your child or yourself or your parent can take that in as much comfort as is possible.
Well, and I think that that's the thing that we really need to let the public be aware of, is that when this initiative comes to the ballot in November, that this is what they're going to be voting on. They're going to be voting on, it's been unanimous throughout the rest of the country, the 4 other states that you mentioned, or the 3 other states you mentioned. Arizona's the 4th state. We were the first, but we're the first one to go to the ballot too. But that this is really a movement that's occurring not just here, but it's occurring, it started here, but it's occurring around the country, that people should have the right, especially terminally patients, should have the right to make their own medical decisions in life and be able to direct their own life and have that liberty to do that. I can't emphasize that enough. And on the second part of it, if Arizona passes this, this becomes a mandate. So there are people like myself that are really pushing the city of Phoenix real hard to start identifying these companies that could be moving here. Imagine the type of movement that we would have here, what this is going to do to our economy, and the type of service it's going to provide to the people that desperately need this medication today, not a year from now, not 2 years from now, but the economic boost that this is going to have, where we're going to be able to have clinics moving here, high-paying clinics, high-paying jobs. Everyone talks about diversification of the economy.
Medical tourism.
Medical tourism. It's all on the radar screen, and these are all fantastic things that are happening here. Christina, I really want to thank you for coming onto the program today. I really want to thank the Goldwater Institute for all the great things that you do. It's funny that Goldwater Institute gets, phenomenal press, and then sometimes not so because of the controversy. But I think that people need to understand your mission. Tell us a little bit about the mission of the Goldwater Institute. We're about to wrap it up, but tell me where we're at, what you guys do, and where your focus is.
The Goldwater Institute believes in free markets and free people. We're a policy think tank. We also have a constitutional litigation center, and so everything we do is focused on free markets and free people and limited government.
And so when you're talking about limited government, you're talking about on both ends of it. It doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat, you end up giving these big freebies away to big companies. You fight that too. You want to say, hey, everybody should be treated. The yogurt shot should be treated the same way in a public setting as the big corporate guy coming in.
Government should not be picking winners and losers.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing that you do is, and that's part of what they generally see in the media, but the other part of it deals with you're pushing total freedom, advocating total freedom for individuals to be able to make their own choices in life.
Absolutely, Right to Try is part of that, but we have lots of other initiatives that we've worked on. The empowerment scholarship accounts, the ESAs, empowering parents to make educational choices for their children. We work on a whole range of freedom issues.
Well, Christina, I really want to thank you for being on the program today. I'll finish with this. I really hope that those of you that are watching this program have the opportunity to investigate what's going on with this new initiative. And Christina, can you tell us your phone number and how they can contact you?
Sure. My phone number at work is 602-633-8965. I can be reached by email at ccorieri@goldwaterinstitute.org. And if you're interested in learning more about Right to Try, we have a whole policy paper on it at the goldwaterinstitute.org/right to try.
And for our viewing audience, that might give them an opportunity to also tell their story to you too. And I would encourage you to listen, watch what's going on with this initiative. If you know anybody that might have a story to tell, or somebody that might need this type of help, I think this is something that they should be able to contact the Goldwater Institute so that they could see what's going to be happening with this initiative. Like I said, there are polling numbers that show over 80% of the public completely in favor of this. So you're going to have an opportunity as a citizen of the state of Arizona, as a citizen of the city of Phoenix, to vote on this important initiative that's going to have a strong impact on you and your family and the medical decisions that you and your family make. Christina, thank you for coming on the program. Thank you to the Goldwater Institute, and thank you for watching the program, and I hope you get involved and you stay involved. And if you have any questions, please feel free to call my office at Sal DiCiccio, Phoenix City Council, District 6. My phone number is 602-262-7491. God bless and have a great day. Thank you.